The recorder clicks, and for a moment there's only the sound of breathing, slow, steady, as if the man on the other end is forcing himself to begin. Then a voice, graveled with exhaustion, speaks. This isn't folklore. It's field research gone wrong. The words hang in the air like frost. Outside, wind moans through the cracks of an old cabin, carrying the scent of pine, wet soil, and the faintest trace of something metallic, blood or rust, hard to tell anymore. The man exhales, and the recorder captures the rasp of memory scraping through him. I don't know who'll hear this, he says. Maybe no one should. But if you do, if this tape somehow reaches you, don't go looking for me. Don't go looking for any of it. He pauses, and in that silence, the forest seems to breathe. I was stationed in the Upper Peninsula, northern Michigan, under contract with a private research company out of Virginia. They said we were studying predator migration, wolves, cougars, black bears. Harmless enough. I'd spent 10 years working wildlife patterns for state agencies before that. This was supposed to be easy money. But the thing about easy money is, it never stays that way. Our camp sat near a drained logging road that hadn't seen use since the 60s. The forest had reclaimed it. Roots twisted through the gravel, moss climbing over splintered signs. Every morning, mist rolled in off the lake and hung low between the pines, swallowing sound. Sometimes I'd wake before dawn and just listen. There was peace in that emptiness. Or there used to be. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. No wolves on the motion sensors. No bear tracks. Not even a crow in the sky. My partner Hensley joked that the forest was dead. He didn't know how right he was. Then came the smell. It hit us one morning as we hiked north to replace a broken camera. Sweet rotting, like meat left too long in the sun. We followed it about half a mile and found a deer carcass. Nothing unusual about that in these woods. Except this one wasn't eaten. It was opened. Split from neck to belly, organs gone, bones polished clean. And whatever had done it hadn't left any tracks. I radioed it in. The company handler on the other end told us to document and leave it alone. Predator dissection, he called it. Probably wolves testing prey. But wolves don't dissect. They devour. That night, while reviewing footage, one of the cameras caught something strange. Trees shaking 30 yards from the lens. No wind, no storm. Just movement, heavy and deliberate. Then, for half a second, a shape flashed past the frame. Upright. Too tall for a man, too broad for a bear. I slowed the playback, and my gut clenched. The eyes, there were eyes, reflecting light like a cat's, but forward-facing, human-like. Hensley told me I was seeing things. But I could tell his hands were trembling when he reached for the coffee. The next day, all 4 of our northern cameras went dark. Simultaneously. Power surges, the company said. Hardware glitch. But the wires weren't cut. They were melted. That's when the forest started to feel wrong. You ever notice how some woods hum with life? Birds, insects, rustling leaves? Not here. Here, silence wasn't absence. It was presence. Heavy. Intentional. You could feel something listening. We started hearing noises at night. Not the usual coyote howls. These were deeper, slower, drawn out like something imitating an animal but not quite getting it right. Once, I thought I heard breathing just outside my tent. When I unzipped the flap, there was nothing. No prints in the dirt. No movement in the trees. Just fog curling at my feet like fingers. On the 5th night, I woke to static on the radio. A low, rhythmic crackle, almost like speech buried under distortion. Hensley grabbed the receiver, tapping it like that'd help. Then faintly through the noise, "Don't run." We stared at each other, neither of us wanting to believe what we'd heard. Then the radio died. We packed at first light, planning to drive to base camp 30 miles south. But when we reached the truck, the windshield was spiderwebbed with scratches, too uniform to be claws, too deliberate to be branches. There were marks on the hood too, etched in straight lines, like something had traced symbols into the metal with a blade. The company told us to stay put. "We'll send a team," they said. But no one came. 2 nights later, we found what was left of Carter, the tech they'd sent ahead of us a week before.
His tent was shredded.
His notebook soaked with blood. What struck me most wasn't the gore, it was the arrangement. His gear was stacked neatly beside him.
Boots cleaned. Compass centered on top.
Like someone, or something, had put it all back in order. I remember thinking, it's studying us. The fear didn't come all at once. It crept in, soft at first, then deeper, until it lived behind your ribs. Every sound, every breath felt wrong. Even firelight seemed afraid to reach the edges of the trees. That's when I started keeping these tapes. Company protocol forbade personal recordings, but rules didn't mean much anymore. I needed proof. I needed something that might outlast me. On the 7th night, the fog was so thick we couldn't see 5 feet ahead. The generator sputtered, lights dimmed, and the forest came alive with whispers.
Not wind. Not insects.
Actual whispers, low, guttural, mimicking human cadence. Hensley gripped his rifle so tight his knuckles went white.
Then came the footsteps. Heavy. Bipedal. Circling. Slow.
The smell returned, wet fur and copper, and the air turned cold enough to frost my breath. I aimed the flashlight toward the tree line. For a heartbeat, I saw it, a silhouette, massive, hunched, with a muzzle that glistened when it breathed. The beam caught its eyes, and they shone gold.
It didn't charge.
It just stood there watching.
Studying.
We fired.
The light vanished.
The sound that followed wasn't a growl. It was laughter.
By dawn, the camp was gone.
Everything, equipment, tents, vehicles, erased. Only the burned circle where the fire pit had been remained, and in the ashes, a single dog tag, property of United Systems Wildlife Division. We didn't have a division by that name. I hiked south for 2 days before I found the old ranger station. The doors were dented from the outside, steel-clawed like tinfoil. Inside, more of those symbols, etched into the floor, looping patterns like genetic codes. A folder lay open on a desk, soaked and half-frozen. Across the top, Project Grey Harvest. There were photos, humanoid figures in cages, skin mottled with fur, eyes wild and wet with reflection. Lab notes spoke of genetic resilience, muscular endurance, accelerated healing. I couldn't read more. My hands were shaking too badly. We arrived in the Upper Peninsula in early October, when the trees bled gold and the cold came whispering down from Superior. There were 4 of us then, me, Hensley, Carter, and Diaz. We were told the company wanted predator distribution data, which sounded fancy but meant long hours, wet boots, and waiting for wolves that never howled. The funding was generous, suspiciously so. We didn't ask questions.
Not then.
Our base camp sat where 2 dirt roads met and then vanished into cedar and mist. We built near a stream that looked harmless in daylight but turned black as oil after sunset. The forest had a silence that wasn't peace, it was expectation, like it was holding its breath for something. Even the wind seemed reluctant to pass through. The first week, everything looked routine. Cameras went up, motion sensors blinked red, and Carter, our tech, spent nights calibrating sound traps while Diaz logged readings. I took soil samples near the ridge, where animal trails crossed and ended abruptly, as if something larger had decided that was far enough. Then came the noises. The first one hit just before dawn, when the sky was the color of smoke and frost clung to the tents. It started as a moan deep and low, and then rose until it almost became speech. Every hair on my arms lifted. Diaz muttered it was just a cougar. But cougars don't sound like that. They don't pause mid-growl like they're trying to listen to themselves. We played it back on the recorder. The frequency was off the charts, too low for any known mammal. Carter said it sounded like the mic was underwater, like pressure itself was making the sound. That same day we found our first carcass. A doe, neck twisted completely around, body untouched except for a clean incision along the ribs. No blood, no drag marks, no scavenger tracks. The cut was so precise that the edges looked cauterized. Carter swore it was poachers using some new tech. I knew better. By the 3rd night, our northern perimeter sensors went dark. I hiked out with Hensley to check them, flashlights cutting tunnels through the fog. The forest was still, so still that even the crunch of our boots sounded like an intrusion. When we reached the last post, the metal casing was bent inward, not torn, pressed. Like something with immense strength had gripped it in one hand and crushed it like a soda can. "Bear," Hensley said, though his voice betrayed him.
"Bears don't use tools," I told him. He didn't answer.
We replaced the unit and started back. That's when we heard it again, far off, behind the tree line.
Not a growl. A click.
Like claws tapping against bark.
1, 2, pause 3. A rhythm.
Communicative. By the time we returned, Diaz was pacing the camp, face pale. "Carter's missing," he said.
The coffee pot was still hot. His pack was gone.
His rifle, too. No signs of a struggle.
Just gone.
We split into pairs and began a grid search, radios crackling in and out of static. The fog had thickened so much it felt alive, rolling through branches, swallowing sound. I called Carter's name again and again, each shout swallowed before it could echo. At dusk, Hensley spotted something by the stream. The sand there was wet, smooth, and stamped with tracks that made no sense. Human-shaped but elongated, toes splayed, claws digging into mud. Like a barefoot man wearing wolf paws.
"Could be hoax prints," Diaz offered, voice shaking. I crouched to measure one.
20 inches from heel to claw tip.
Too big. Too clean.
Whatever made them had been standing just minutes before. The air still smelled like musk and iron. We called off the search when night fell. The forest grew darker than it should have been, like it absorbed light instead of reflecting it. We set up a perimeter and checked every weapon twice. That's when the feed came through. The infrared camera on the south line triggered automatically, motion detected. Diaz pulled it up on the tablet, and all four of us leaned in. The screen showed the clearing, faint shapes moving through the fog. Then one of them broke from the trees, fast, blurring like static. It dropped to all fours and sprinted across the frame.
"Pause it," I said.
Diaz froze the image. Even through the grain, we saw it, limbs too long, shoulders hunched like a man forced into an animal's frame. The head turned toward the camera just before it vanished. Two bright eyes, glowing pale gold, reflecting heat like glass. Carter's voice crackled on the old radio frequency then. No words, just a hiss that bled into a whisper. Hensley grabbed the receiver.
"Carter, you copy?" A pause. Then, "Don't move."
The voice was low, drawn out, not quite his. The forest answered with silence so heavy it pressed against our eardrums. Then, from somewhere to the east, came the scream. Not a man's scream. A tearing, primal sound that made the air vibrate. We ran toward it, weapons raised, flashlights slicing the dark. The fog swirled in our beams like smoke from a cold fire. Then we saw movement, branches bending, leaves trembling, something massive slipping just beyond sight. We found Carter, or what was left of him, in the clearing. His body was crumpled near the tree line, eyes wide open, mouth locked in a silent scream. His chest cavity was split, ribs spread apart with unnatural precision. No tearing, no chewing. Surgical. As if someone had studied anatomy and practiced.
His heart was gone.
Hensley vomited in the grass. Diaz started praying under his breath, his voice barely audible. I crouched beside the body, flashlight trembling in my hand. There were markings carved into the dirt around him. Rings and spirals drawn with a finger or claw. They looked like DNA diagrams, half erased. Then came that sound again. Low. Resonant. Close. Every animal instinct in me screamed to run, but my legs locked. The sound vibrated through the soil, rattling my teeth, drumming in my chest. It was like standing inside a living heartbeat. The trees shifted. Something was watching us. I could feel its gaze, not wild, not mindless. Calculating. Curious. Diaz screamed and fired into the dark. Muzzle flash lit the trees for half a second, revealing something massive between the trunks. Gray fur slicked with rain, arms longer than a man's, claws reflecting light like wet metal. It moved with deliberate grace, stepping back into shadow as bullets tore bark around it. When the gun clicked empty, silence fell again. No growl. No movement. Just our breath and the soft patter of mist turning to drizzle. We dragged what we could of Carter back to camp. Nobody spoke. Hensley wrapped him in a tarp, hands trembling so hard he could barely tie the knots. Whatever that thing is, Diaz whispered, it's not just hunting.
It's playing. He was right.